Hi, I'm Joe Zucchi, inventor of the Revolution, and people often ask me, is it possible to launch from this position or from this other position? And the answer is the Revolution is easy to launch from the standard upright position. But the amazing thing about the Revolution is after a crash, it's very easy to simply reverse launch your Revolution. It's also possible to launch your Revolution from several other positions, and I'm going to show you some techniques in this video. Launch number 1, leading edge up or standard forward launch. This is the best launch position for new rev pilots. Make sure all 4 of your lines are tight, your handles are even. For example, this bottom line here is now loose. Step back, dragging your kite until all 4 lines are tight. Thumbs on top, pull it, and rotate your thumbs back over your shoulders as you step back to launch. Just like this. A common mistake is to try to launch your rev while it's leaning back too far. What happens during the pull sequence is your rev just tilts up. It actually doesn't launch. So the key is to tilt your rev up straight first and then launch. Another problem is to pull without rotating your handles. This can cause your rev to fly, but in a hover or even in a reverse position, you won't actually fly up. You need to rotate those handles back. This is what a poor launch looks like. Another common mistake is to pull too hard on your launch. It won't necessarily stop your rev from flying or launching, but since the rev is based on precision control, that over control is really unnecessary. This is too hard of a launch. It hardly takes anything to launch a rev. Launch number 2, the inverted launch. Start with the leading edge down. Start with your rev inverted on the ground. All 4 lines are tight. If you can tell which lines are on top, it happens to be these lines. Push that thumb forward, That'll cause your rev to roll over. If there's not enough wind, push the thumb forward and pull it slowly, softly, smoothly past your hip. Thumb forward, smoothly pull. An advanced version of the inverted launch is to reverse both handles at the same time and reverse your rev straight up. Thumbs forward. This launch can be challenging for new rev pilots because you end up in an inverted hover. Some problems for the inverted launch are, number 1, inconsistent handle rotation. Set that handle rotation and then smoothly launch. Don't keep doing adjustments while you launch. Number 2, soft lines, light lines, inconsistent line tension. Just like before, if you have an inconsistent line tension, you'll get an uneven launch. And number 3, over control. Just like before, this launch is very delicate, so set that angle, pull softly, and make very little adjustments until you get a feel for the inverted hover. Launch number 3, face down, tips toward the pilot. The goal here is to get wind underneath the wing to lift it up into an inverted launch, so you're ready to launch from here. This is much easier to do with the Reflex because the Reflex actually holds the wing up. Without the Reflex, your wing is laying flat. Okay, let's go for a launch without the Reflex first. Remember, our goal is to get that air under that wing. So we're gonna kind of shimmy it along. We could try a quick pop, we could try a smooth pop, whatever it is, whatever it takes to get that wind off. Remember, we don't have any Reflex in this situation, so let's see what happens. There we go, we're into an inverted position and we're ready for an inverted launch. Now let's do it with the Reflex. Now with the Reflex, lots of times you don't even have to do anything. The wind will just pop it up. Our wind right now is 0. It's ranging from about 0 to 3 miles an hour. So let's give it a little pop. Okay, we're in our inverted position and we're ready for reverse launch. A couple considerations to keep in mind is if you have sand on your wing, it's going to be more difficult to do this launch. Number two, with the non-reflex version, if you're pulling it across the ground, the line can get wrapped over the wing, and that'll make it so you won't be able to launch. And number three, if you're doing the non-reflex version and you don't pop it up in the first couple of tries, consider the wear and tear on your wing, especially if you're in sand. You might not want to do it more than that. Go up and just set it up and fly. You can see you can hardly keep the reflex on the ground. Okay, launch number 4, the dead launch. This is your rev is face down on the ground, leading edge into the pilot. Without the reflex, this is almost an impossible launch, and that's why they call it the dead launch. With the reflex, you have a curvature in that sail, and once again, remember, we're trying to get wind underneath that wing to lift up. So there's really 3 subtle variations on this launch, and the first one is pull the top lines. This tends to accelerate your rev forward and gets wind underneath it and cause it to glide up into a launch. Option number 2, pull the back lines. This tends to, the idea is to pull the bottom of that wing towards you, forcing the top of the wing up into a launch. And option number 3, which is the one that I like to use, is I like to pull the front and then the back and actually simulate the way that the wing actually climbs. I want to pull the front to get it to glide, and then I want to pull the back to pull it in underneath it. Okay, let's take a look. All right, here we go. Sharp pull and then reverse those handles. Here we go. Sometimes you might find yourself in this situation where your rev is actually parallel to the wind direction. Here are your lines, they're underneath your rev is face down, and the wind is blowing this way. It might be possible to launch from this position by getting this back wing to rotate around and into the wind. Then we'll pop it up into an inverted launch. So let's easily pop those strings around and see if we can get it to launch. This is a pretty advanced launch because there's a lot of little things going on with the motion and everything. So a couple concerns. Number one, you have to rotate that wing around and back into the wind. So you're moving over the surface quite a bit. So if you're in sand, of course, you got the wear and tear considerations. And number two, that wing is moving around quite a bit with all those lines there. There's a good chance of wrapping the wing. So it's a very interesting and very cool launch if you can pull it off, and I've used it more than once. The rev is amazing because it can be relaunched from many different positions. But the best thing to do is to avoid those difficult conditions by staying in control of your rev. So for example, if you land nose down or crash into the ground, don't walk towards your rev because it will lay your rev down backwards. Normally your rev, if your rev is face down, you can generate a launch. But if it's laying on its back, it's very difficult to do. It looks like this. Don't step forward. For this launch, what we're going to try to do is take those back tips and tilt them back up where they were before we stepped forward. So what you want to do is these bottom handles are holding the back lines. Hold those up as high as you can and then step back, hopefully tilting your wing up. This is much easier to do on short lines, so on longer lines it's going to be more of a challenge. But now we're in a standard inverted launch. Use these launch techniques to take your rev flying to a new level. Join us at Revolution Club 38 to learn more advanced skills. It's free with your rev purchase. Visit us at revkites.com and we'll see you on the field.